years ago won't buy much of anything here today.
And why the millennial generation is starting to give up because they can't afford to get a good job or own a house.
8 million Venezuelans voting for this assembly, saying it's actually less than 3.
It is. And people are going to start rioting in the streets.
Was reported to have asked Putin for military support that would help him stay in power.
We will make America safe again. And yes, together, we will make America great again.
And they ignore him. And 8 more years goes by till Bernie himself finally admits to his sons, hey, I've been running a Ponzi scheme.
Does its dominance mean it can use the alliance for its own ends?
Since 1981, bond yields, also known as coupon rates, have just gone down and down and down.
The Federal Reserve note will be your biggest financial liability.
We're live. RTD Live Talk. It is Monday night, the 12th day of the month of August, and tonight's discussion will be very important because, as you guys can tell from the title, I haven't really talked much about g-sibs, or globally systemically important banks. And so that's something that I believe is worthy of our time this evening, because I got some articles I want to share with you, but more importantly, I've actually just finished up reading and glancing through some of the documentation submitted by the banks to the FDIC in regards to how they're going to resolve come this next banking crisis, and just reading through 2 major banks. I won't say the names yet, but yet you know who they are because more than likely you have something to do with them. But yet just to hear how they talk about and how they word in legal documentation form the easiness or the ease that they're going to subject their depositors, as their customers more likely, to, and how they're going to be treated. And basically at the end of the day, this is just a business, and I know just the wording itself is very alarming. So I'm going to definitely link you guys to where you can go read some of this for yourself. But once again, the globally systemically important banks are unraveling right now, and they're starting with trimming the fat in a sense of cutting back on some of their employees, as well as one article talks about debt forgiveness of an entire country. And unfortunately, it was in the U.S., but we're going to dive into that. So I got 28 minutes. I want to be as sharp and concise as I can. As always, there's a number, 313-462-0027. Let me know your thoughts. There's a chat right there. If any new viewers, feel free to let me know where you're watching from. I'll acknowledge your presence. And but yeah, what I want to get into, man, and just having read these resolutions. So according to the Dodd-Frank Act, which was a proposal passed by law that all banks had to come up with a resolution on how they could prevent the next crisis and it not be a taxpayer burden. But yet what they've suggested, and it's actually written in the Dodd-Frank bill itself. I encourage you guys to go glance through it as well, but you'll see it there, plain text as day, how they're going to resolve their banking matters in a orderly fashion through bankruptcy. And having read through 2 documentations, it's very interesting how they're going to do it. And they're basically going to utilize the law to shuffle things around in their books, in which they've already been shuffling things around according to one of the banks. And so, yeah, man, it's interesting. It's good that they've kind of given us a game plan, but unfortunately, it's good to say most people have not actually read it. So I'm going to share it with you guys tonight. But if that being the case, who's tuning in? We got Jay. We got Lanya Frank. We got Silver Retard. Okay, different name. Appreciate you for watching. We got Ace One. Tech Shot. Says, how many 10-ounce silvers to make 1 ounce of silver? Is that a serious question? Or, yeah, so 1/10. So you need 10 total. 10 to make 1 ounce. And so that's why it's labeled as 1/10. If I'm reading that correctly. But, let me, my thoughts. 1/10 of an ounce of silver. Yeah, 1/10 of an ounce. Okay, yeah. Says, what up, Mike from Corpus Christi? How you doing? Low blood pressure. We got D. We got Andy. We got David. Hello from Providence. We got Sergeant Rock 1. Okay. So, amongst everything that's happening, as you guys saw earlier, I did the video on Argentina. And actually, was it about 2 hours ago, reached out to a friend of mine down there, and just in talking to him, he was completely caught off guard. And so he was not anticipating Mr. Fernandez and the former president, his running mate, actually sweeping the preliminary voting the way they did. So he's basically saying that he's very concerned because the opposing party to Macri is purely socialist. And so it looks like that socialist trend is really catching on, especially in the fact that, Argentina, they've been in a recession. They've been in and out of recession for the last umpteen years. So it's nothing new there. But he's very concerned, and to hear the tone in his voice as he's describing what's going on down there, he himself even hinted at, Mike, hey, I might be needing to get up out of here if things continue the way it's going. So it's definitely not good news down in Argentina from the losses being taken today with the peso and the currency there. But that's kind of what's going on. But more importantly, all eyes are going to be on the U.S. and more the globally systemically important banks. So I want to kick off with the articles because I actually shared this earlier on, let me see, pull this out. I shared this earlier on the Facebook page. And so since then, I've had several people comment, hey, Mike, what do you think this is about? Share your thoughts. And so this article here came out today. Let me kind of zoom in if I can. And it has to do with up in Canada. And so I tried to Google to find out if there were any backstories that I could link to. And I kind of caught one, and I'm assuming it has something to do with this, but we'll play along with it. But it said, flabbergasted, Chase Bank forgives all credit card debt for Canadian customers. And I'll link this so you guys can read it for yourself. But it gives a testimony of a lot of people who were surprised that all of a sudden they got a letter in the mail last week saying that, hey, all your debt's been forgiven. And it has to do, that there's no official tally of how much was forgiven. But I'm thinking, hell, a full-fledged country had to be in the billions as well as probably in the millions when it comes to customers. But as of last year, March 2018 is when all accounts in Canada were suspended. So all lines of credit from Chase Bank that does business, JPMorgan Chase that did bank in Canada, all accounts were frozen, stopped, flat out. You can't work with us. We're not doing business in here no more, but you still owe us. So let's work out this resolution plan so we can get paid. And so after this March 2018 time frame, there's been no usage of Chase credit cards in Canada, but yet everyone still owes their debt. So here's a little testimony from Douglas Turner. He says, I was sort of over the moon all last night with a smile on my face. From Ontario, a Canadian broadcaster, Turner said he still owed more than $4,500 on his card. I couldn't believe it. So his debt was wiped clean, $4,500 wiped clean, as well as probably a couple other million people, equaling billions. And so my initial thought, when I first saw this was like, man, like clearly to kind of ease some of the losses that they're probably going to take in the coming days as they trim their fat, as well as cut back on employment and things of that nature. What better way than to probably let off a couple billion from a country that you are, you're not really functioning in, but yet you've extended credit to that country. So JPMorgan Chase is a New York, too big to fail bank here, and they happen to, I'm sure, do business all over the world. But Canada, they forgave their debt, and so I don't know the official reason why. But one thing I did notice when I was researching just to find out some backstory, and it looks like JPMorgan Chase, they offer their Sapphire credit card into Canada, and I believe it's probably globally, but yet Canada came up as one of the articles there. And it mentioned that it was rolled out a year and a half ago, maybe two. And because of the lack of profitability when it came towards issuing that card, more people were taking out cards for the sake of getting the 100,000 miles, free flight and bonus, all this stuff they packaged it up as. It was a hell of a deal that a lot of people took out to where the JPMorgan Chase, they ended up finding themselves spending more money than they were making. And so that led them to dial back on the amount of miles they were offering, and to the point where they canceled a lot of people's cards back then due to the fact that they were spending more than they were making. And the only reason they're in business is to make a profit at your expense, with the whole usury concept of charging excessively high interest rates, which is as of right now today, interest rates are at the all-time high, but yet their banking measures with their central banks are getting lessened. So that's kind of what I could put together. But as I went through more of what's really going on, and I dived into some of the banking resolutions on how to unwind their liabilities and assets in bankruptcy in a calm manner that will not, I guess, cause a globally systemic event. Reading through some of the documentation lets me know how they're going to do it or how they're planning on doing it if everything lines up very well. But the people who will be hurt, as one of the too big to fail banks mentioned, and it is one of the biggest banks in our country, they basically mentioned who's going to take the losses, and it's not going to be them. So this article here doesn't give much detail outside of that, but my initial thoughts are the fact that because of the fractional reserve lending model, they were able to bring into existence how many ever billion that they forgave. So technically speaking, if it's debits and credits that's being issued to people that the currency doesn't really exist apart from being on their balance sheet, then I'd imagine there's no true losses when the funny money was created for their benefit anyway. So I'm sure they can just, minus 50 billion, or, probably not that much, but minus 10 billion or 5 billion, and it just be a normal transaction that they got to write off somewhere else type of thing. So that's my thoughts on that. I'm assuming that we might get more news out, hopefully sooner than later. But the fact that, if you're in the U.S., I'm assuming if you have a balance with Chase, they didn't send you a letter saying, hey, we will forgive your debt. Merry Christmas early from Chase, JPMorgan Chase. So, yeah, man, but this is what's happening. And in linking all this together, there's another article that I want to share with you, which is very telling of where all this is truly heading. And let me pull it up here. So here's the leading article for this evening. Global banks are cutting 30,000 jobs this year. So we have a too big to fail bank that forgives billions to millions of citizens in Canada. Then we have the global banks, around the world deciding to trim off some of their departments a little bit early. And I'm not surprised after having read through some of the resolutions here that they've submitted to the FDIC. So it's public information that everybody can go read for themselves to get an idea as to how they plan on winding things down. And then just another note here at the very top here, you guys can see the market conditions today. S&P closed 34.79 down, 386, 189 down. So once again, clearly things are unraveling. Now it's a matter of focusing on where it's going to eventually be the trigger or where it might hurt the most. And this banking situation, I believe, is going to be very important because everyone who does business of some kind has a checking and savings and some type of investment product through the too big to fail banks or even a credit unions. The credit unions aren't immune to this whole banking contagion because they are going to be subsidiaries of the too big to fail banks. So give an idea what's going on here. It says global investment banks have been suffering this year with European banks being hit the hardest. As a result, nearly 30,000 jobs have been cut or are set to be cut across the sector. And of course, Deutsche Bank, everyone knows Deutsche Bank is the biggest derivative holder of all times. And it says Barclays has also had issues. They're cutting 3,000 jobs. So these are globally systemic important banks that are doing the best they can to wind things down to where it doesn't make them or it doesn't allow them to be the primary scapegoat for the world's financial meltdown that's underway. So not only do we have the monetary policy that's being problematic, but then we have the lenders and the driving force of the economies around the world, which are the banks, because the banks are what has direct transactions and has direct access to you and I or the citizenry itself. So expect, this 30,000, as I always say, if we're hearing 30,000 from a mainstream news source, Business Insider, that means they've been given permission to throw out a number, but expect that to be doubled, tripled. So say 60 to 90,000 jobs easily in the financial sector, whether it's too big to fail banks or some smaller institutions that are heavily dependent upon these too big to fail banks. So just this type of information here is enough to get my attention to really find out, okay, and if you've been a fan of this channel, I've been following the g-sibs for quite some time now. I've watched more than enough of FOMC open door meetings on the resolution process. I think I posted a couple to the channel, but I've actually sat through and watched from beginning to end, trying to pick up and just look for hints and clues as to how they're going to resolve this. And the key methodologies for them resolving the banks was already finished. And so what really caught my eye, and I'll actually pull this up for you now. So this is the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC. Of course, everyone who is a depositor in a bank, period, commercial bank rather, because credit unions have their own, CDIC or something like that, credit, just whatever. But everyone, has that sense of comfort because of this this statement here says each depositor insured to at least $250,000 per insured bank. So everybody, for the most part, who don't know how this monetary system operates, has a sense of security saying that, hey, I got insurance up to 250, so I'm good. But here we have Title I and IDI resolution plan. So if you read through this, the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act requires that bank holding companies with total consolidated assets of $50 billion or more and non-financial bank companies designated the Financially Systemic Oversight Council for supervision by the Federal Reserve, whatever. So everyone had to file their plan as to how they personally would not be the primary reason for the banking sector going belly up. And so I'm going to put this here as well. And, once again, this is just one man's opinion, but if it's of value to you, I suggest you guys, if you bank with one of these institutions, you might well find out how they plan on sticking it to you. So if you type in, so it's a total of, it's 790 entries. So 790 entries. So these are all the banks as well as financial institutions that are, even, as it says here, institutions that are not, their origins aren't U.S., but yet the very first one here, Agricultural Bank of China. So they were responsible for filing with the FDIC as to how they themselves would not be the primary reason for the domino effects to fall. And so everyone has submitted. So it says submission date. Everyone has submitted. Let me open this up some. I'll show you the first 100. So since Dodd-Frank Act was put into play, I think it was 2011. Since Dodd-Frank Act, every bank had to go through all types of checks and submit documentation. And so some of the documents here are older, 2016, 15, 14, 18. But it all had to be done by July 1st of each year. And, of course, as their balance sheets change and their liabilities change, they got updated. And so if you just find your bank, wherever you're located at, if your bank does business in the U.S., it's on here. Find it. Read it for yourself. But I wanted to pull out two banks that I know of that are the big kahunas in this country. And so the very first one is JPMorgan Chase. Oops, so let me go back because I realize, I apologize. I'm not, you guys don't see what I see. So I apologize. Let me get this right. So here's the page from FDIC. I put that link in the description. But this right here, that third statement is what I'm talking about. It says each depositor insured to at least $250,000 per insured bank. Okay, fine. That's that sense of comfort that the financial institutions want to make sure you have, so that you don't decide to do something else with your funds. But once again, I think Cyprus is a good example of what happens when banks decide to close and they give you an allowance on your own money. You're not able to get that, and basically to this day, I don't think the Cypriots were made whole for their losses. So you take that for what it's worth. But as of each year, December 31st, each bank got to submit something. So these are all the banks, 790 of them. Find your own bank if you want. But the bank that I wanted to touch on, and it's 155 pages. And what caught my eye to why I wanted to pick JPMorgan Chase was because JPMorgan Chase just forgave probably a couple billion in Canada. So I'm thinking can they really afford to do that? But of course they can, because it's a currency they created and it just solely exists on their ledger. So if that being the case, it's 155 pages here. But what really caught my eye is you thumb through the introduction, you look for things that stick out. And so what stood out to me was says, our resolution plan is designed to meet real world challenges. And so I scrolled down to find out exactly, okay, what does that mean? Because most people don't bother to really read and find out how this impacts them. But if you scroll down, I'll get to the nitty gritty of what this. And so here, I actually made a documentation here. I'll share this on the Facebook page for those that are, like the page. But here we have our single point of entry resolution strategy enables orderly failure without government or taxpayer support or harm to the U.S. economy. So that long sentence there is what they plan on selling you with as they basically send you a letter, or the moment you go to the bank and you realize you're not able to withdraw your funds. So it's a pretty long statement there, but this is what I think is important. So stick with me on this. As you go through here, this documentation was just updated at the end of June of this year. All the other documentations have a little bit of date to them, 2016, 2015, 2014. But the big boys are just recent. So just a couple weeks ago, they updated some things. Not sure what they updated, but here's some of the bullet points that I think you guys should be interested in. But yet, the primary bullet that stood out when it talks about how they exactly plan on doing it, and the visual aid above, if you guys are interested, I'll share it, as I mentioned, on the Facebook page as well as the community page of the channel. But it gives a good diagram as to how they plan on operating all this. But here's what you need to hear. Here's what you need to read. This statement right here is something that impacts you. If you are, and of course this is my opinion, go read it for yourself, but if you are a banker, if you are a depositor or a shareholder, if you possess stock, I'm not assuming what tier, I don't know the tier, but if you are a shareholder, as it says here, it says, and they're telling you this, it says only the shareholders and creditors of our parent company absorb the losses of the firm. So absorb the losses. What does that mean, absorb the losses? If you are, and this is of course one man's opinion, I'm not a certified but absorb the losses to mean like you're going to take an L, which means that if you have direct funds in that bank or shares a part of that bank, when they go through the bankruptcy process, Chapter 11, so here we got Chapter 11, U.S. bankruptcy. When they go through all that, the parent company, and so this is a part of their game plan. If you scroll up to the top and you read through some of it, in a nutshell, I'll give it to you. What this documentation tells me with an untrained eye is that they have the parent company, JPMorgan Chase, and they have 10 or how many ever subsidiaries or smaller branches that operate in different departments, different sectors. What they're going to do is they're going to let the parent company, the primary institution, JPMorgan Chase, which is what everyone knows, they're going to let that company, they're going to file Chapter 11 bankruptcy with that individual company. But what's even more alarming is that when you read through it more, down towards the bottom, they talk about how they've already transferred a good portion of the important assets into the subsidiary companies, and they're listed here, but they're going to stick the bag to the parent company. So they're going to trickle down the losses, and the people at the top are going to take the losses, and every other company down low will get the benefits of having stuff transferred. And because it was done, and I'm not sure if it's this one or the next one, they said because they did all that transferring before the documentation was needed to be submitted, it doesn't qualify under the Chapter 11, so they don't have to report it or something like that. But who are the shareholders? Shareholders are individual owners of equity into the company. So if you're owning JPMorgan Chase company and company, I'm not sure, let me see, and of course I would advise you to do your own homework on this ordeal. JPMorgan Chase, I want to see what their current stock is trading at this current moment and see where they're at. So JPM, so from what I gather in a short little brief reading, as of now, $107 is a single share in the company. And assuming, it's been rising ever since, but assuming they have some type of globally systemic important type of event, this 107 might take a dive now, soon, whenever. But yet shareholders as well as creditors. So the creditors are the depositors. Creditors are unsecured in the fact that they fall down second, third tier in the when they divvy out stuff. The creditors are the depositors and savers. They're dealt with last, and they get the crumbs of this whole ordeal. So they basically told me when I read this that only the shareholders and creditors of our parent company, the parent company is the current company is listed as the face of the organization, JPMorgan Chase and Company, stock symbol JPM. And so those are the people that are going to take the losses. Now you factor in, they got trillions of dollars of deposits and savings and da-da-da-da-da. So if they already got rid of their most important, and one of the things says, they've already transferred one of their most valuable assets. So basically they're saying that anyone who's not valuable is expendable, and who's expendable? It looks like the shareholders and the creditors are expendable. But once again, that's just me ranting on. I apologize. Hasn't been much back and forth, but this is what's going on. I thought this was important because you have JPMorgan Chase in this little resolution here, and I'll put this resolution, I'll put this inside the chat so people can actually read for themselves. So once again, don't take my word. This is just one man's, quick glances. I glanced through this, 10 minutes before I click go live. But if this is what they have planned, and this is just JPMorgan Chase, as I mentioned, there are 790 other institutions listed on this FDIC, Dodd-Frank Act resolution plan. Everyone had to submit one. Go find your bank, find out how they plan on sticking it to you, and then at that point, once you know how you're gonna be dealt with, then, the rest is on you. You've been warned. You do what you do. You know what I'm saying? But it's one of them things where if you know what's coming, perhaps you might, rethink some things, i.e. rethink the dollar, but whatever. So here's another company. I'm going to end it with this one. This is probably America's favorite in a sense, because this company has been in the news, since I don't know what. But as you guys see here, Wells Fargo, and this was a June 2027, June 27, 2009. So this is another freshly updated resolution plan. And, the IC 165D, I don't know all that stuff. I ain't got that far. But once again, if you do business with Wells Fargo, here's a little documentation as to how they're going to stick it to you. These are called stick it to you resolution plans, because once again, this is not designed for you, the public, or the investor, or the primary holder to profit, but you can go through it and get an idea. But it don't take much to realize that this is designed, this is legal jargon for those that actually know what they're reading, and go from there. But here's something that stood out. I'm reading through it. It says, achieving our resulting organization post-bankruptcy. So this long little spiel here is interesting, but here's the key factors. It says, after commencing the parent bank, which is who? Wells Fargo. That's what they're listed, publicly traded company. I'm assuming that's the parent. It gives you the breakdown officially. Let me show you the breakdown. I might go over a little bit, but I'm going to show you the breakdown because I think this one, they have a lot of charts and graphs. So here's a visualization of how this is going to be unwound. And so the parent company, I would assume, is the leading one up here. This is Wells Fargo and Company, and it's listed as WFC Holdings LLC. So this is, to my knowledge, the parent company. Somebody let me know if I'm wrong. But this is the parent company, and here is all the subsidiaries. We got Wells Fargo Securities, Clearing Services, Bank, National Associates, National Bank West, blah, 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 blah. So we got all the branches here. So what they're saying is, and what I'm about to read is that they're going to allow the parent company to take all the losses. When they go before the bankruptcy court, Wells Fargo Company, the parent company, will take all the hits, while they've already transferred enough valuable assets to all these other companies here. So as of now, I would assume that you are probably if you're doing business with them, you're probably a part of the parent company, because your bank statement probably says Wells Fargo Holdings LLC. Assuming I don't know, but you're included in the parent company is what I'm getting at. Scroll down, page 22. The lingo itself just sounds very shady, but it's designed to benefit them. After commencing the parent's Chapter 11 proceeding, the parent would transfer, upon the bankruptcy court's approval, the stock of WCH to a new substantially debt-free holding company, quotes, new hold company. So, once they're going to transfer the good stuff over to a whole new company, says the equity interest of which would be held in a trust. So they're going to put all our funds in a trust. says for the exclusive benefit of the parent's bankruptcy estate. It says, as a result of the transfer of WCH to the new holding, all the WCH material entities, subsidiaries will become indirect subsidiaries to the new holding company. So all the old subsidiaries will be a part of the new subsidiary. So basically, just off glancing, they're going to let the primary parent go under while they create a whole new entity, and they're going to let the subsidiaries roll under the new entity and keep all the good stuff, and let the losses be bore by the shareholders and the creditors, which once again, you're a creditor. It says the parent would also transfer its stock in form, the parent's only other direct material entity subsidiary to the It says the transfers create a streamlined ownership structure whereby all of the material entities, except the parent, are direct or indirect subsidiaries of the new holding company. So if I'm reading that correctly, let me know if we got any legal people out there or whatever, but yeah, definitely check this out for yourself. But what they're saying is basically they're going to let the parent company take the loss, the reputation, the whole proceedings that will be dealt with when it comes to bankruptcy, while they create a whole new company, let that company get all the goodies, and then that company going to ride off into the sunset with all these, transferred assets, and not have to really worry about directly the creditors and shareholders that were shafted in bankruptcy. So people will definitely be left out holding a bag of nothing when all this unravels. So once again, just from my little 2 cents here, this is what's happening with the globally systemic important banks. I would encourage you to click the documentations that I posted up above. Go to the FDIC, find your bank, read for yourself, see what you see, and then, you can't say you didn't know what's coming down the pike. But yet, when you got banks that are laying off thousands, you got banks, one of the too big to fail banks decided to forgive possibly a billion or two, or whatever. At the same time, we got government issues, we got central bank issues. So behind the scenes, these banks are already ready to rock and roll. They're ready to blow. They know who's going to take the loss, and it's going to be those that are still deposited in those institutions. And some might say, well, we got the FDIC. They're going to take over. They're going to help. They're going to come in and rescue us. But yet, when you think about it, there's millions of people with deposits in those accounts, which equals trillions. But yet, FDIC, if you look at their balance sheet, they're sitting on billions. Trillions, billions, not enough. So, hello, caller. What's the name? Where you calling from?
Hey, Mike. This is Jeff from Florida. How you doing today?
I'm doing good, Jeff from Florida. What's on your mind tonight, my friend?
Hey, good, man. It's funny. I actually sent you the link to your YouTube channel just the other day about them, canceling off the people in Canada their credit cards.
Yes,
and you got to understand the way the whole banking system works. If you look at it, it's like you're saying the same thing I'm saying. When you put your money in the bank, you're an unsecured creditor to that bank.
Mm-hmm.
They're not there to be your friend and give you a lollipop or whatever and look out for your best interests. It doesn't work that way. They got the fractional reserve system, and the FDIC has maybe 1 or 2% of the money in holding to actually cover the money that's outstanding in the banks.
Right.
So it's not just going to be the banks that's going to be everything. And I've been trying to post articles lately, and I don't know, it just didn't go through. But if you look lately, it's not just in the banking system. GNC is shutting down. Walgreens said they're shutting down hundreds of stores. Pizza Hut is shutting down stores.
Yeah.
So, I mean, everywhere you look, there's companies that's filing bankruptcy and going out of business. Part of it has to do with demographics of baby boomers, retiring, and they're not out there raising a family and spending money left and right, But a big portion of it is a global systemic slowdown everywhere you go. And it's not just going to be pockets here and there. It's going to be everywhere.
Yeah.
So just like you were talking about with the banking system contracting, is going to be they're going to have to try to inflate their way out of it. That's what they're going to try to do. And just like you said, they're going to have a holding system. So it's almost like a magician. They have you look one direction, and meanwhile, when you're looking the other direction, they pull out the magic trick out of their hat. That's where the rabbit comes out of their hat.
Yeah.
So they got you looking and jiving at this particular holding company, and then with the sleight of hand, they create a new company that's holding all the losses.
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, I think we should look at possibly having bail-ins as well. You see what happened in Cyprus when all those people couldn't get their money out of the bank?
Yeah.
I think we can be looking at a scenario similar to that. And not a lot of people are talking about it. They're just going on about their day. They don't think that there's any systemic problem with the banking system, or they drive by and look and say, oh, yeah, that used to be a Toys R Us, or that used to be Sears or JCPenney.
Yeah.
They don't understand the whole thing is going to continue to escalate. I don't think it's going to be a quick thing where you just snap your fingers and it's over with. It's going to slowly decline week after week after week after week after week. Like I said, if you Google GNC, you Google car companies, you Google Pizza Hut, you Google Walgreens, you can Google Fred Marketplace. All these companies are filing bankruptcy and going out of business. JCPenney, Sears.
Yeah.
So even Walmarts are shutting down.
Yeah.
So if you just look around, you'll see businesses that used to be there now are all boarded up.
Right.
So I think that, like you said, someone is going to be left holding the bag. It's just going to be, is it going to be the bankers and the shareholders, or is it going to be the unsecured creditors that have a bank account with them, and the people that are, you know, just going about their daily lives, the tax-paying citizens. You know what I'm saying?
Right. I agree 100%. And
all right, Mike, I'll let you go because I know your timer is almost down, but I'll talk to you again soon, man. Just be looking out. I'll send you some more articles.
Appreciate you, my friend. Thanks for calling in.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, bye.
All right, so here's something, Jeff. I appreciate you calling in. So here's FDIC. Here's actually their balance sheet. So you want to find out what they're sitting on to ensure you. It gives you a good idea as to what's going on. It says the FDIC insured institutions report net income of $60.7 billion in the first quarter. And so it says commercial banks and saving institutions insured by the FDIC reported aggregate net income of $60.7 billion in the first quarter of 2019, up 4.9%. So the increase in net income was mainly attributed to the $7.9 billion increase in net interest income. And so if you look here, all FDIC insured institutions, so this little graph here gives you an idea as to how they've been attempting to ramp up their, or that the income rather has been going up. But yet, look what happened back in the 08-09 time frame. Of course, I'm assuming, I wonder why they're not showing going back a little further, but when all those billions were being withdrawn as people were, you know, looking to get out of the banking system, so they were short a lot of paper in the negative here. But this is an indication as to what comes into the FDIC. And let me see, I'm trying to find out the total holding. It says the federal deposit balance increase. So it tells you their balance increase, but institution performance, income, so clearly they have to have quarterly home profile homepage. So I would assume they have to have their total balance available because this is public information. But I don't see it. But for those that are not believing or curious as to how this is going to turn out, feel free to, you know, run through this page here. I'll put the link here so you can see the FDIC numbers. But once again, you know, what's interesting, you know, without even seeing their complete balance sheet, it's talking about, you know, net income, report net income of $60.7 billion. So they're talking about, they're showing $60.7 billion this year. All FDIC insured institutions, where I'm assuming that they either contributed that to the FDIC as a part of their insurance arrangement or what. But, you know, $60.7 billion, you know, it's not like, you know, that's not a lot of money when you're sitting on, when you owe trillions. So not quite sure how this is reading, but you get the idea that they're bringing in billions a year, but yet, you know, they have trillions on deposit. So, yeah, you do the math there. Let me know what you come up with. Both that being the case, that's all she wrote for this evening. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me. And as always, if you've enjoyed the back and forth, don't be afraid to donate a thumbs up to the channel. Right beneath this video here, there's a button. Give it a thumbs up, and we go from there. And ignore this timer here because it's already ran its course. But as always, all the information you need here. We got free stuff down below. Join the gold team. You got to get your weight up. Do what you got to do. But you know what's going on. You've been shown. But anyway, be blessed, be safe. Enjoy your evening. Peace.